Hello and welcome to Hammer and Dice. Today we'll be looking at Monty Haul Issue 2, Rogues in the House, which, as the title suggests, contains a plethora of content pertaining to rogues, heists, and running a game set in a criminal underworld. This scene is written by Mark Finn, with artwork by Mike Messer and Adam Keogh, and was proofread by Ben Gibbs. Before we begin, I just want to say many thanks to Mark Finn, who graciously sent me issues 1 and 2 of this scene to review. I did receive the scene for free, but do aim to give it a fair and honest review, and just wanted to make that clear at the beginning. So thank you again to Mark. It's very kind of you to send it to me to have a look at. And for any of you watching, please take a look at my review of issue 1 before watching this video, as a lot of what I have to say about that scene also applies to this one too. Before we look at the content of the zine, I just want to quickly go over some of its other facets, such as its art. If you've seen my review of issue 1, I'm just going to be repeating points from there, because the zine is very well made, very good quality paper, and the cover's got this matte finish to it that's almost rubbery, which feels very good to hold. The artwork throughout is very good, with the characters on the front cover appearing in various situations, and each piece of artwork is very appropriate for the section that it's in. The only downside I have for this issue is that there are a section of blank pages at the end, which could have been used for more content, but I will go over that a bit more at the end when I get to the section on poisoners and skullduggers. Diving into the content, the zine starts with a brief introduction from Mark, talking about the inspiration for the zine, how long he's had some of the ideas presented here, and giving an overview of the articles that you'll find in the zine. The conversational tone in this section is found throughout the rest of the zine, which makes it really easy to read and often gives you an insight into the decisions he's made while writing the zine. This would make it a bit difficult to follow if the zine was used at the gaming table, but almost all of the content in it is used for when prepping a game, so it doesn't detract from the zine itself. Following the introduction, the first article in the zine is Campaign Notes, It's a World of Thieves. So this article is very similar to the one in the first issue of the zine, which was talking about how to set a game in a magical world or a particularly magical city. This article breaks down all the things you need to take into consideration if you plan to run a game themed around heists and criminal activity set in a world of thieves. The article assumes players will be taking on the role of gentlemen thieves, who may be thieves, pickpockets and card sharps, but are generally of good alignment and aren't cruel or murderous. Subjects it covers include wealth inequality, to set up a reason for the group of thieves to gang together and make a score, appropriate levels of law enforcement and punishment, that will give your game stakes and consequences should the players get caught. Likewise, those that the players steal from could come back looking for revenge or to steal something off the players themselves. And there is a wealth of advice on the roles NPCs can take in the game as allies, contacts, rivals and enemies, and how to manage the plethora of characters that your players will come across throughout their heists. This information is really useful for world building any urban environment, both in campaign play and in one-shots. The advice is very pertinent, and while it is certainly themed around the World of Thieves style gameplay, I would honestly use it to add depth to any large city that my players were going to spend time in, even in a regular game of D&D. This advice continues in the next article, which is titled D&D Heists and How to Pull Them, which is the first part of the FIB system, which the next article will go into more detail about, so I'll go over it more then. So this particular article is a guide for how to run a heist game in a D&D campaign. It is very well written, and it can be used by anyone from a beginner to a master criminal, and they'll all appreciate the narrative structure of the heist that's laid out here with a 5-act structure. This is the setup, casing, showtime, the handoff and the follow-up. Each of these sections has plenty of advice on what is supposed to happen in it, what could go wrong for the characters, advice for the GM on how to handle the players throwing you a curveball, and what typical tropes from heist films are appropriate for each section. For example, in the handoff section, where players are meant to hand over whatever they stole to their employer, there is plenty of room for a double cross, a triple cross, or even for the players to do a runner with their loot themselves and try to fence it off to the highest bidder. Following this is some general advice for GMs on how to run a heist session and how to make it run smoother. For example, there's a section on showing your work, where after the heist is completed and the game is over, you can show all the elements of what went into creating it, so that the players know that the double cross you pulled on them at the end was pre-planned and you didn't just do it to screw them over. This fits in well with the rest of the FIB system, which is the next article in the zine I'll show you, as all of the roles you generate in using that system can be shown to your players to show them how you generated the heist. This works well for one-shot games or side missions, as the player's investment in the world isn't as high as in a campaign, but I wouldn't do it in a full campaign play, as I think lifting the curtain like that might ruin the player's suspension of disbelief in further heists. Other than that, it's a very good write-up of how to structure a heist-themed D&D game, gives plenty of advice on how to run it. The previous 2 articles are really just leading up to the next one, and when all 3 are taken together, you have almost everything you need to run a successful heist game session. That next article is the FIB random heist generator itself. This generator, the fill in the blank system, is a series of random tables that allows you to generate the core skeleton of a heist game that you can hang the rest of your setting on and make a complete game session or campaign out of. Using it, you generate all the parts of the heist and then blend them together to make a coherent experience. The different pieces of information you generate are who you are stealing from and their disposition, what has been stolen, its description, where it is being stolen from, the catch that adds an unexpected twist to the situation, hitches that happen while the heist is underway, and the reward that the characters will receive upon completing the heist. Along with this, there are different results on those tables that change the circumstance of the heist, adding further complications. For example, if you are stealing from royalty, then the consequences of your heist will be much greater than if you steal from a merchant. Rather than go through each table entry by entry, I've created a heist using results rolled up from the tables in the article. So I'll just go through that now to give an example of everything you could create using this system. Your players are approached by a representative or a gang boss that they are seeking favour with. He offers them a job that will pay them lucratively if they manage to accomplish it. One of his rivals has recently received a shipment of jewels that have been disguised as regular stones. They are being stored in a temple that is sponsored by the rival gang. The messenger who approached the players lets them know that the old priest who ran the church is buried with a key to it, so that if they can find where he is buried and retrieve the key, then they'll have a much easier time of getting into the church. But what they don't know is that the old priest was buried with a lot of valuable treasure of his own, so the burial place is trapped with poison gas, making retrieving the key that much more difficult, but potentially a large score of its own. If they're successful at lifting the jewels from the church, then they'll get a cut of the sales cost. But also, while on the heist, the players find out that the jewels are about to be moved, and by none other than a character that players have encountered previously or from one of their backgrounds, meaning that if they are recognised, then the whole gang they are stealing from will know who to go after. If they successfully pull off the heist, then the gang boss they are stealing from loses face and quits town, leaving their employers in a much stronger position and giving the players their favour. From that example, you can see that all the tables add together to make the setup, action of, and payoff from each heist very unique, and means that this system can be used again and again. Better yet, the Fib system itself is actually standalone and not tied to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and while it assumes a fantasy setting, it can be used with any game system of choice. The Fib system, when combined with the design notes on the World of Thieves and the guidance of how to run a D&D heist game, all add together to make for just over 30 pages of great content that is a pleasure to read and achieves what it sets out to do, which is give you all the advice and tools you need to run a D&D heist game. Following this, there are several articles of player-facing content, starting with the College of Tomfoolery, a new bard college. This is a subclass for those who want a more humorous take on a performer. The College of Tomfoolery allows the character to become a fool or a jester. The subclass takes inspiration from the medieval tradition that jesters are often overheard gossip and intrigue in the courts where they are performing, and it backs this up with a variety of magical abilities that allow you to enhance your performances with a jester's garb and a magical marotte, which is a traditional carved jester's staff that acts as a bard's casting focus. The most interesting ability from this subclass is the 14th level ability that empowers the bard's marotte to be able to catch a spell cast at the bard, store it for up to a minute, before allowing the bards to recast it themselves. This fits very well with the image of a jester tweaking the noses of those more powerful than them and getting away with things that others wouldn't. I think it'd be a great addition to a 5th edition game, and in the hands of different players could be played completely differently, equally having the ability to be a hilarious or annoying performer, or a potent and zany magical caster. Following this is a new rogue archetype, the Architect. This is a rogue archetype for those who want to be Danny Ocean or Robin Hood, the one who comes up with a plan and then keeps it on track when the dung hits the fan. This archetype allows characters who choose it to have contacts in every place they come across that are either reliable or trustworthy, but never both. They can gain knowledge about a target and extract information from them just by speaking to them. They can change the narrative of a situation to suit their needs, and they can assist their allies from a distance in order to carry out a job. And finally, they can slow time to a crawl with their amazing reaction speeds. These all come together to create a subclass that feels right at home in a heist environment and would be very fun to play. Although I will say that it does feel very similar to the roguish archetype found in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, the Mastermind, which has many similar abilities, but they receive them in different order, so the power of each ability is changed. For example, the Mastermind has a 3rd level ability called Master of Tactics that allows the character to use the help action as a bonus action and be able to use it at range, while the Architect has a 13th level ability called Master of Logistics, which allows them to give advantage to their allies in skill checks and saving throws for up to 10 minutes. So you can see that those two abilities are quite similar in their purpose, although the design that's gone into them due to their power level is quite different. The subclass also reminds me of the Blades in the Dark RPG, which is an RPG that focuses on heists and other criminal activity in a shadowy Renaissance setting. The core ability that characters have in Blades in the Dark is that when they come across a situation in a mission that they had not foreseen, they can initiate a flashback where they prepare for that situation, or they can spend resources from their character sheet to have equipment on them that allows them to overcome the challenge. The Architect's ninth level ability, Contingency Plan, is very similar to this and allows the architect to change the narrative of a scene with assistance from the DM so that it suits the characters better. Doing things like adding an ally to the scene, adding equipment, switching worthless loot for valuable loot, or altering something else within the scene to give the characters an advantage. Overall, I like what the subclass is trying to achieve, but I think the amount of overlap it has with the Mastermind takes a lot away from the other unique aspects that it does have. Following this, there are 2 new backgrounds for players who are looking to add variety to the game that is set in a world of thieves, or as alternatives to the criminal background. These backgrounds are the Banished and the Convicted. A character who has the Banished background is a foreigner in the land where the campaign takes place, forced to flee their homeland because of some crime, real or imagined, in their past. The backgrounds feature Notorious makes you reviled by people from your homeland who have heard of your crimes, giving you a negative modifier to social checks. Likewise, it makes you a minor celebrity amongst the criminal underworld back home and gives you a bonus to the social checks with them. An example personality trait is I am paranoid about being caught unawares and take elaborate precautions to avoid being surprised at night or in social situations. And an example ideal is self-preservation. I will do whatever I must to stay free and safe. The second character background is Convicted, where your character is an ex-convict and you have paid your debt to society in prison and have since been released. This is represented by the class feature Insider, which gives you an insight into how jails and prisons run due to your familiarity with them, and you're able to identify behaviours and threats if you find yourself in one and can notice weaknesses in their security measures. There is an alternative feature for characters in games that don't have a prison system, Mark of Shame, which gives you the same modifiers to social checks as the Banished background, but with the option to hide the mark if possible. An example personality trait of someone with a Convicted background is I never got enough to eat in prison, now I will never miss a meal or a snack or tea time. And a flaw is I sold out a fellow thief to save my own skin, and if that knowledge gets out, my reputation is ruined. Both of these are very good additions and add more variety to characters with a criminal background, or if you're running a heist game and using the rules presented in the scene. Nothing bad can really be said about adding more options to the game, and both of these fit very well within the theme of the zine, so they'd be very good to add to any 5th edition game. Following this is the final article in the zine, Alchemy and Herbalism Ironed Out Part 2, Poisoners and Skullduggers. If you want to see what I have to say about Part 1 of this article, please go watch my video review of Issue 1. Poisoners and Skullduggers, both of these are expanded options for the 2 career paths presented in Issue 1 of Monty Haul, the Alchemist and the Apothecary. These add depth for characters who wish to create potions, drafts and elixirs in their downtime. The 2 expansions, the Poisoner and the Skulldugger, are criminal themes expansions to those career paths. Poisoners are a prestige class for apothecaries that characters can take by being proficient with a poisonous kit. This allows your character to know how to create a range of poisons, how to identify and handle poisonous plants and animals, allowing you to extract powerful reagents from them, how to identify the effects of poisons, and how to cure poisons themselves. Meanwhile, Skullduggers are a prestige class for alchemists that characters can access by being proficient with thieves' tools and tinker's tools. They can create small mechanical devices that can assist with sleight of hand tricks or conceal weapons such as poison rings, smoke grenades, spring-loaded darts, etc. A Skulldugger can also improve sets of thieves' tools, set or disarm traps, and when they have mastered their craft can incorporate magic into their designs to create small items known as gimmicks, for example, a Hand of Glory. If you liked what was presented in Issue 1 of Monty Haul with the Apothecary and Alchemist career paths, and you'll find more to like here, as the Poisoner and Skulldugger are laid out much the same, letting you know the abilities of each career path, and then the requirements the character must fulfill before being able to progress on to the next rank. I'd say that the downside of this particular article is that in the previous issue, following the Alchemy and Herbalism Ironed Out Part 1, there was the Well-Stocked Shop article, which gave numerous examples of what players could create. This issue doesn't have a corresponding section, with the appropriate Well-Stocked Shop article being reserved for the next issue of the zine, which leaves a lot to be desired as far as inspiration goes for the kind of things that players can create, particularly as there are 5 blank pages following this, which could have been used for this purpose and would mean that you get everything you need to run a Poisoner or Skulldugger in one zine. And by adding them into the next zine, it would take away from the next zine's issue, which is Houses of the Holy. But Mark does talk in the introduction of the zine about running out of space in this one for all the content he wanted to put in it, so maybe it was more of an issue with layout or printing costs or something like that, because the zine's already got 55 pages of content in it, so I think a few more, you'd be pushing 60 pages, and then this wouldn't be so much of a zine as a small booklet at that point. That's everything in the zine. So overall, I'd say that everything presented in the zine is a good addition for a DM wanting to have a change of pace from a traditional dungeon crawling adventure, and gives lots of advice on how to create an urban adventure for players wanting to do something on the wrong side of the law. A lot of the content in the zine can also be used to add depth and variety to urban environments in general, with a fib heist generator usable for more situations than just heist planning. Despite this, I'm not sure D&D is the best rule system for playing a full campaign around heists and the criminal underworld, as something like Blades in the Dark is purpose-made for games like that. To conclude, I think that everything presented here would be a great addition for adding variety into a one-shot or a side mission as part of a larger typical D&D campaign. And if you like what you found in the first issue of the zine, there's a lot more of it in this issue of the zine, so make sure to pick it up. Thank you again to Mark Finn for sending me this zine to review. This has been Monty Haul, Issue 2, Rogues in the House. Thank you for watching.